Okay, it's almost election day, and I don't know, things on my mind. It's almost November, as in tomorrow. I just had on holiday music for a second, so I don't know. I'm feeling a mix of things, and uh, I like to say, and if you've heard my podcast recently, I've said this a couple of times. The city that I live in to me feels like a microcosm of the country. It has for years. We're especially divided right now in the country, obviously, and I don't feel especially divided in this city. But I know that there are people of all different political parties, all different faiths, and all different backgrounds, obviously. And I had some hope this past summer when Juneteenth came around in the city that I live in, which is Sandy Springs, Georgia, when a an event was put on by the city, and it was phenomenal. I was blown away. It brought me to tears because the city has had an interesting past. I would say like 14, 15 years ago, it wasn't quite as diverse as it is now, at least in terms of people being engaged. So this event took place, and it was an event that drew an audience that was very multicultural. And I'm thinking about that as I think about the election and how a lot of people from different backgrounds are coming together actually for whichever candidate you are going for. We have to acknowledge that people from all backgrounds are coming together to support their chosen candidate. Well, anyway, I'm using this to take a moment to share a couple of clips from two recent guests, my most two recent guests, Melody Kelley and Megan Harris. Megan is actually running for office, and Melody is actually in office. Megan is running for a seat on the Board of Commissioners in Fulton County, Georgia. And Melody is a city councilwoman in the city that I live in, Sandy Springs. And recently, when I was talking with Megan, uh, Juneteenth came up. And it also came up when I was talking with Melody. Melody was the person who spearheaded the Juneteenth event that I just mentioned. She gathered a group of people for a committee that put on just such a wonderful, beautiful event. And I'll probably have some clips flowing through this segment that I'm bringing you. And it was just wonderful. So she talked about how she came to really be focused on the city of Sandy Springs acknowledging Juneteenth as a holiday officially. And so she speaks to that a little bit in our episode, and then how she was inspired to do a presentation that really, I think, floored a lot of people in that it was so powerful. And Megan also talks about how Juneteenth is very special. She was on a separate committee when Juneteenth, uh, when Sandy Springs, not the city of Sandy Springs, but the community of Sandy Springs put on an event in 22 and 2023. And Megan, I believe, I know she was on board in 2022, and I think she was on board in 2023 with the community aspect of bringing an event to Sandy Springs in celebration of Juneteenth. She mentioned actually in this episode, she kind of blended those events with the most recent event. She actually was not a part of the 2024 production of Juneteenth in Sandy Springs. And I wanted to really make note of that because it was such um, I want to call it a change maker. I guess it remains to be seen in what way, but certainly and bringing people together for that celebration and opening eyes for people who maybe had not been exposed to Black culture or African American history before in this kind of way. So I wanted to make a distinction about that from our conversation in episode 149, and also Melody's conversation in episode 148. So here are a couple of clips around this. And again, I'm thinking about it almost on the eve, not quite, but almost on the eve of our election. And, prayers that however this election turns out, that we can find a way to respect each other's differences. Sometimes that can be hard, even for me, when I see hate or hear hate or see something on the news. Sometimes that can be even hard for me. But when it comes down to it, we all come from the same place, believe it or not, and that is the Lord above. We are all children of God. That's a fact. So I pray, however, this election turns out, that we can find a way to see each other's differences and bring down some of these walls and barriers and really see each other for who we are in our heart and spirit. So here we have it. I bring to you a couple of clips from Melody Kelley and Megan Harris on Juneteenth celebrations.
So I was a part of the original group that brought about the first Juneteenth celebration in Sandy Springs. It was myself and 4 other neighbors came together when we realized that we had nothing on the docket a few years ago. I think 2022. We came together, combined our resources, and we made it happen right there in City Springs. And then we had the second one. The first one brought out almost 1,000 folks. And then the second one doubled that number. And we were very intentional about, how we organized that, the engagement with the community. We wanted to make sure we were supporting Black-owned businesses and highlighting them, having the city notice them. So when the city puts on their own programs and shows and whatnot, we have these businesses on the short list, and that's how you elevate other businesses as well. You don't gatekeep. You want to put someone in a position where other people can pick them up too, and that's what helps a business thrive.
It is something to see the evolution of diversity in the city, especially people being engaged in government, in local government, because I would say 2010, I wasn't seeing that. And so now 14 years later, there is a big difference. And that Juneteenth event at the Performing Arts Center literally brought me to tears.
You're right. I have a video that I have saved, and I'll have it forever, where we have a segment when we had our Jolie Kylene. They were doing the African dance tutorial for the children. And when you saw Indian children, you saw Asian children, you saw white children, you saw Black children. And I was like, that's what we're about. That was everything. It gives me tingles when I think about it and talk about it now. But that's what made it the whole thing worth it. That's because that's the whole purpose, right? To bring us all together and then showcasing that unity to the next generation.
And so this particular event and around Juneteenth, you got a lot of pushback in terms of it becoming an important holiday for the city. And so when this event happened, the very first performance, there were multiple things going on at this event at the Performing Arts Center and the City Springs campus where City Hall is located. They have a green space outside and a stage. And so inside in the Performing Arts Center, which I want you to get into, it was so powerful to me because there was Black and white and, just all shades and hues and backgrounds and white. And the reason that I want to say that is because I felt like these performances are going on and people who are not exposed to Black culture or other cultures, it was resonating.
Yeah.
They understood what they were looking at
Yep.
or being introduced to. And that literally brought tears to my eyes. I mean, it was very emotional to know the trajectory of this city and, you know, the ups and the downs, and to see like, hey, this is resonating with this person and that person.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's an understanding, and that's how we start to care about each other.
That's how we start to care about each other.
Because we're not different.
Yep.
We are not different from each other. We
have
just
more in common than we think. And what we have in common can change the world.
But
I really believe that.
We're not different from each other. So,
That's what it was. It was rooted in that, though.
Yeah. Thank you. So
Yeah.
please speak to everything I just brought up.
That's a lot.
I know.
That's a lot.
I'll remind you.
Because you recognize that there is the event, and I'm happy to talk about it, but there's also the political exercise. And I want to just, you know, take a moment and offer you flowers right now, because so we can talk about the event, and that's great. But before the event, there was like I said, there was a political piece of it, which was simply to get the acknowledgement and the funding and the holiday itself. And, you know, part of one of the reasons I value you personally is because, to the extent that I'm multifaceted, you know, all these, I check a lot of boxes. You're one of the few people I feel comfortable talking about all of it with. Right. And so I went through this, I would argue it was a weekend. We had a council meeting on a Tuesday, and the weekend preceding it, you know, I knew I had to make an argument for Juneteenth. You mentioned there was pushback. There was pushback. There was typical, you know, why do we need to change anything? Why do we need to add a holiday? Why do we need to acknowledge this? You know, I talked to people who straight up said, I don't think it should be a holiday. We have an Independence Day. You know, why do we need an additional Independence Day? So I had an uphill battle, not just with my colleagues to sort of whip the votes, but to also speak to a community. And it was a tough weekend. And I don't know if you remember, I had to call you regularly. There was something happening, like spiritually and politically. Like I had to go places within myself I had never been. And I remember I had started doing the genealogy work for my family. I had decided, okay, I'm going to go. Actually, no, I did the genealogy work for Sandy Springs. I started going through old tax records and trying to connect those with slave schedules. And I really did this over a weekend, and it was incredible. I mean, you think you know what these holidays are about and what history is, but you start going through that documentation and you start seeing how human beings were counted like animals and things. And that's, you know, that's where, you know, you come from to some degree. And I just needed somebody to talk to, and you were there. And I could talk to you about the political side, which, you know, is what it is. You know our community, but I could also talk to you about the personal melody side, which is, and I think what you expressed to me was, you know, sort of whatever is sort of being birthed in you to kind of, you know, allow it, right? And it culminated to a 17-minute presentation, which in Sandy Springs is unheard of for a council member to speak that long on a topic. And I went everywhere from, obviously, labor statistics, data on other cities and holiday schedules, but I also showed, you know, my grandfather, and I went into the slave schedules and the data of the genealogical research related to my own family, which was raw. I had never done that. Obviously, I know I descend from slavery in America, but I had never looked for those last names. I'd never looked for those plantations. I will never be the same. My screensaver is my grandfather and has been. I used to change my screensaver all the time. Let me take a cute selfie. I'm going to change my screensaver. But it has not changed because I finally got it. I got it. And as I said in my presentation, I would never be the same. So anyway, that was the political exercise, and ultimately,
But wait a minute. Share about your grandfather, if you will, what you shared with that at that meeting.
right. So what ultimately came up, and let me be clear. Every year in early December, the city of Sandy Springs has something called a Sparkle Parade. It's early December. It's on a Sunday, or at least it was on a Sunday that year. Mind you, that was a Sunday. Our meeting is Tuesday. Now I have my PowerPoint presentation done. I'm done with it. But on Sunday, I see our mayor. And our mayor, he has like a ton of grandkids. And so this particular, at this parade, he has his grandson with him in the float. They have this float. It's like a car, a beautiful car, convertible. And he has his grandson. And there goes that inspiration again. The thought says, what about your grandfather? And so that night I went and I started to do the research on my grandfather, who was born in 1915, right? He was born in 1915, mixed race, Northern Louisiana, raised by his mother's family, the African-American side of his family. And I started going through picture books, and I found several pictures. I have several fond memories of him being my first babysitter. My mom worked, and my parents worked, and I would be left at home with my granddad. And by that time, he was an elderly gentleman. He was on a cane, but he'd walk around, he'd chase me. I can remember, him letting me eat ice cream cake and and all kind of things. I vividly remember this man. And the people he was raised by were slaves. He was born in 1915. So the folks, his granddad was a freed slave. And that was full circle for me. The argument that is so far away. Not for me. I was raised by someone who was raised by slaves. I was influenced. A lot of the tradition I am here in came from him. And he got that from freed slaves. And that was ultimately the way I closed that entire presentation.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
Yeah. And then the event, if you could just discuss.
The event.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
then, so you go through all this, and it was a unanimous vote, by the way, to ultimately what we decided to do was we added a flex holiday for employees. So they got an additional holiday, but that holiday was not June 19th. The holiday is any day they want to take throughout the year. So they got the additional flex day, and then we decided to officially appropriate funding for
an event.
And the question becomes, how do you do it? Particularly with the understanding that Sandy Springs is, let's keep it real, majority white suburb. Technically, it really is. It's a microcosm of America, which makes it a majority white suburb, and it's affluent as well. So there's a responsibility associated with that. And what you could do is you could look all over Metro Atlanta and you could just kind of copy and paste. You can do that, or you could truly sit down and maybe try to think about it. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to use art as a medium to educate. So we wanted to educate through art. And that's why inside the theater, we had approximately an hour or so performance. We said, we're not going to do a lot of preaching. We're going to have a few speakers here and there, but we want to leverage the impact that seeing bodies move and hearing music, the impact that has on a person. That's, sometimes that can jar people more than a speech ever could, or more than, we were interested in just going outside of the box. And it was very important that we obviously made the city of Sandy Springs look good. We have a brand. We wanted to be on brand, but it was important to me to make sure the people who attended felt honored. The people who attended. So there were people there, who have been celebrating Juneteenth for decades. I wanted them to feel honored to be there. Wow, look at the thought they put into this. They didn't just slap, a DJ and a couple food trucks together and call it Juneteenth. They put thought into it. How do we tell this story so that everyone gets it. And so when we kicked it off, and Namari, shout out to Namari Dance Center and Namari Productions, we kicked it off with Mary, Don't You Weep. 2 days prior to the event, I got to go to the Namari Dance Studio, which is a local dance studio here in Sandy Springs, and I watched those young ladies do it in the studio. And I was...
You were in tears.
I was in tears then.
Yeah.
So I knew what y'all were about to get. We kicked it off. We kicked it off as an ode to Christianity, because we know the part that has played in in our history. Faith, let's put it that way. And so we had, in the backdrop, we had like a cross, and then we had these young people do this amazing performance to kick it off. And I think that told everybody we're serious. We're serious. This is not some variety show. This is not some talent show. Come look at some kids. No, this is a story, and idea of interwoven kind of performances that are meant to really bring something up in people.